Hello, and welcome to the Bellingham Real Estate Podcast. I'm Paul Balzotti. I'm here with Lee Rosales.
Hello.
Welcome, Lee. And today we are going to talk about homebuyer tips and just homebuyer strategies in this new market with the market shifting. So we'll cover some strategies and some tips and learn a little bit more about you. You have been in real estate. You've been in real estate for a couple years with another real estate team. Mm-hmm. And then you joined John L. Scott. What has it been since you joined us?
February 1st.
February 1st?
Yeah.
Okay. And, you, just side note, Lee also was on the other side of the transaction when I helped my mom buy her house here.
Yes.
And that's how I met you. Yep. And I thought she is such a fabulous realtor that I wanted her to someday join John L. Scott. And it's been amazing. And you've been crushing it with buyers. And so let's start by talking about that. So, we're in a new market. It's been slowing down, but how many buyers are you working with right now? And how has that been going?
Well, so I have 2 pending buyers right now. Okay. And then I have 4 other buyers that I'm working with that, it has been a tough conversation in the last couple months, or the last month especially, of, shifting expectations because of interest rates. Mm-hmm. But, the most important thing is just being able to educate all of my clients on other options that they may have, or, maybe looking at exterior towns of Bellingham. There's Linden, Ferndale, Nugent's Corner where I live. Love that place.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's just been, for me, I think I already had a good system set up before things happened. And my buyer's consultations, I really do just try to set the proper expectations of what they're about to experience. And that way things aren't bombarding them, as they're happening, like,
right.
Getting stickers or getting shocked of interest rates and what they are and where they are. So being on top of knowing where interest rates are that day is really important.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you definitely, that is a big thing, is buyer consultations. Mm-hmm. Some realtors just go and we'll start meeting buyers out at houses. We make a big deal about meeting with the buyer and going and having a proper consultation, which it sounds like you're doing, which is great. So you have a couple buyers with pending deals. You're working with a few others. You team up with Mira Gregory on some things. So do you guys kind of just with buyers, and we didn't talk about this before, but I was just curious, do you guys just kind of more back each other up as far as for showings, things like that? But you kind of have your own clientele and then you kind of cover for each other kind of thing?
Yeah. And I mean, if we get a client together through our team, we'll one of us takes lead because we do feel like it can get overwhelming for a person to have 2 people. But we loop each other in on all conversation, group texts, emails, so that the other person knows exactly where the client is in the process, so that if for any reason something, I got sick for a week or something, who knows? But life happens. If for any reason that happens, Mira or I can just pick up right there, and we know exactly where that buyer is, what houses they're looking at, what their interests are. So we have a full understanding of where all the clients are.
Yeah, so that's really ideal, is that a buyer would be getting all of your experience and expertise, but then you do have a good backup system and support system that way, the way you guys work. So I love the way your team dynamic works. Now, let's give a quick market update.
Yep.
So the summary is the beginning of the year, half a month supply of inventory, crazy, but everybody knows all the bidding wars of all the craziness.
Yep.
We had up to 85 to 90% of homes selling in the first 30 days. Now we're down to just under 50% selling in the first 30 days. Mm-hmm. Rates went from the 3s to up high 6s at this moment. Mm-hmm. And what's today? Today, October
3rd.
October 3rd is when this is being recorded. Yep. So as of October 3rd, they're in the high 6s. And the supply of inventory has increased, and from under a month supply to 3 months, which is 3 months would still be considered a pretty strong market, but more balanced, right? And then the other really meaningful stat is home appreciation. So appreciation was up to 20%, and then home prices have settled down 4 or 5%. Decreasing this summer and then settled out the last couple months. So that's kind of the little snapshot at this exact moment. So how are you preparing buyers when you're sitting down with them and you're saying, okay, this is a new market, higher rates, it's harder to qualify. Mm-hmm. A lot of buyers feel priced out.
Right.
So what are you doing? What are you talking to them about to try to make it work?
Yeah. So we definitely talk about getting a seller credit. So depending on, where they're off, how much they're willing to offer. Obviously, if we're offering under list price, there's a certain point where you can't really ask for everything under the stars.
Right.
But, if we're offering list price or somewhere very close to it, I'd say, a seller credit to buy down their interest rate or pay for their closing costs so that, they can be in a little financially better situation up front. I also talked to them about really shopping around for a lender because right now you'd be surprised at how many different lenders actually have very different rates. So just asking them to do their homework and really just try to shop around. I know it's a lot of paperwork, trust me, but I do think it's worth it if it saves you thousands of dollars. So, and portfolio lenders, especially, they hold their loans in-house. They don't sell them to second market. So they have the opportunity to maybe be a little bit more competitive. So yeah, things like that, just to try to help my clients understand that even though what they're reading is like interest rates are high, there's so many options that we can come up with. And then also just making sure that I do, a market analysis of the property that they're wanting to make an offer on and seeing what else is out there and making sure we're, that the price is right for them. Or if we find, if we discover that maybe we can come in a little under and it's still a good deal, that's something that we talk about too.
Yeah. You brought up a couple really good points there with the buy down. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is, a year or two ago, the reason why they weren't hearing about that wasn't just because rates were already low. It's because when rates were at 3%, buying it down the way the market worked, it didn't even really pencil out. But now in almost every situation, if you buy it down and you plan on holding that property for 3 to 5 years or longer, the rate difference, the lower rate, is paid for itself. So if you pay more upfront, you can get a lower rate and in a really meaningful way. So that's a really good point. And then, having the seller just negotiating more. That's a good point as far as just, once you get into the deal. So let's say you got their closing cost, you negotiated the price down, they bought down the rate, got the rate down. How is the dynamic changed and how is your negotiation changed over the last few months versus really the last couple of years?
That's a great question.
Very loaded question. A lot of ways to answer that.
Well, I did want to start off by saying when I started in real estate, it was, the fresh pandemic times.
Right.
And I was taught back then, as everyone should have been, to do a market analysis of any, so you can coach your clients on the value of the home and, if it's overpriced or, things like that. Well, very quickly I realized it doesn't matter at that time. Yeah. At that time, it was just like everyone's going to pay whatever they can pay to get the house. Now, I love being able to come back to that and show my clients, the value of what I bring to the table, of the education that I can provide them. And I do think doing those market analysis for them and having those conversations makes them feel confident because they're like, yes, I know what I'm doing. I know that the numbers matter, the numbers work.
But that's a really good point because, everyone was more excited to buy 6 months or a year ago. Yeah, the rates were lower, and so that helped in that respect. But it was a lot more difficult time to buy, and you had to throw kind of some rationale out the window.
Yep.
And so being able to take your time and go through these consultations, run the numbers, look at buy downs, run an analysis on the house. That's nice.
It
is. So it is
I
like
love this market.
And so it's way better. We get to do our job more, but the buyer gets to actually analyze and think logically as much as possible about the biggest investment they're ever going to make.
Exactly.
So it makes, it's a huge deal to be able to do that.
And inspections are back. Yeah. And you can actually negotiate for repairs.
Yeah.
And, really go to bat for your client in a way that we haven't been able to do for a while.
When rates were really low, you brought up shopping lenders too. When rates were really low,
it didn't matter. Well, they were all pretty similar.
Yeah, not only that, but the loan officers were so busy, and they were, it was taking a while for them to get back to you, things like that. Now all the loan officers, they're not doing refinances, right? So they're all super hungry for business.
Right.
So even though the rates are higher, if you are shopping rates, like you said, and you say, hey, I got this from this, this from this, they are all motivated for business right now.
Right.
Because they're not doing refinances. They're totally dependent on purchases. So you can shop them and get a little bit better rate than you would otherwise by just asking, just by kind of working that a little bit that way too.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess that's the preparation and the process of and some of the things you do now more than you could before. But yeah, you just touched on inspection being one of them. Or what else has kind of happened in your buyer process lately that like is new?
Right. Well, yeah, now that we have inspections, just negotiating for certain repairs. And that's a big win. I mean, obviously sellers want to sell now, and buyers are harder to come by. So they're a lot willing to compromise a lot more than they would before. And then also at the appraisal stage, I haven't had this happen yet, but if a low appraisal comes in, we can negotiate for that price.
That's true.
So those, these are all things that we now get to do during the pending process that have been near non-existent.
Yeah, I think we had almost no inspection. Yeah. I mean, we were down to very few inspections, and you're using that as a negotiation point now too. Mm-hmm. What about kind of moving forward? So when you have buyers asking you, what do you think is going to happen over it? Because some people could buy this fall or winter,
right?
Or you could wait until the spring. How do you have that conversation with buyers?
Yeah. I just had this conversation. It's tough. I don't have a crystal ball. And that, I try to tell people that, but what I do know is, the information that you have today, you can be certain of, right? Interest rates are where they are today. You can lock it in. I mean, we're hearing rumblings of almost 8% interest rate coming up. I feel like the best thing for a buyer to do is go with what they know right now instead of trying to guess what's going to happen in 6 months, or like you said, ride it out and see if buying in the spring is better. But I also tell my clients, it really depends on your situation. If you have to move now, we'll get you something. We'll get you situated. If you have the ability to wait, if you feel like that's the better choice for you, then we'll do that. But I will admit that I am not a pushy realtor.
Yeah, which is good.
Yeah. I mean, my thing is I just educate my clients and I provide them the data and the information, and then kind of defer to letting them make the choice that they feel comfortable with. And typically people people feel confident about a decision if they're educated on it. Yeah. So, with my clients, the client that I was having that conversation with, he said, well, my lease ends in December. Let's start then. Okay, great. That's when we'll start. Because then he can go month to month. But, as far as feeling rushed to buy now, he was just like, well, based on what I said about what does your situation need, he decided, okay, we'll just wait till December. Whatever interest rates are, they are what they are then. And we also talked about, I think a lender told me this, but it was marry the house, date the rate. I think that's what it is. Yeah. You can always refinance in the future when interest rates are in a better place. You could do an ARM loan depending on, your situation and what you qualify for. But so I just try to have that conversation with people of, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. We at least know what interest rates are today. Are you comfortable with where they are today financially? Great. Yes, no. Then we can kind of, take the conversation in whichever direction, depending on the client and what their answers are.
And you mentioned ARM loan, and for somebody listening that doesn't know, an ARM loan is a 7-year or a 5-year or a 10-year interest rate lock instead of a 30-year, which is at a lower rate than the 30-year rate. And that's a good point. And a lot of people are locking in on ARM rates right now, which makes a lot of sense. And I love what you're saying as far as just educate the person on where things are at, and then let them decide on what's the best time to buy. Because I feel like a lot of times what people have a hard time wrapping their head around is they're trying to time things this certain way. And then usually I'll ask them, are you 5 years out, or how long do you plan on holding this house?
Yeah.
And most people are buying a home for 5 years or 7 years or 10 years. And then it's like, okay, if home prices are 2% higher, 3% lower in the next 6 months, is that going to, in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of the house too, right?
Yes.
It's kind of like, can we find them the house?
Yes, that, yeah.
But if you were to guess, I'm just going to make you do it. You don't have to actually, but if you were to guess, and this is just straight up, like you had to put money on it, 12 months from today, would you think they'd be about the same, a little lower, a little higher, home values?
Honestly, I think it'll be a little higher.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because I personally believe Bellingham is just going to continue to grow. There are always people relocating here. I had an influx of clients this year that were parents buying houses for their kids, either kids that were in college that they just rental prices just didn't makes sense to their parents. So they're like, well, we'll just buy a house for you, rent out rooms, and, while their kid's in college, so there's all different types of people buying here for different reasons. People retiring, people buying for their kids. Like I said, people relocating here. It's just, there's always people moving here. It's such a beautiful location. I could go on about Bellingham. Yeah. But with that said, I see maybe just leveling out, but also just maybe getting that 1 to 3% kind of appreciation in a year. I see that personally, but
yeah. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And maybe nationally, maybe it's down a little bit.
Right.
But that's nationally, right? And so there's a different supply and demand everywhere. Exactly. And so I agree with you, and it probably has a lot to do with what rates do. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Lee, for jumping on. And thank you for listening or watching.
Thank you.
Please leave it a 5-star review if you're on iTunes, or a like on YouTube. And appreciate it, guys. Cheers.
Have a good day.